Rome's highest office, the consulship, was held by two men at the same time. They shared equal power, sat both for 1 year, and either was able to veto the other's actions and decisions. It took Rome about a century and a half to figure out how the office should function. Every addition was made because something had gone wrong or someone had fought for it. One honest warning. Most of what we know about the early Roman state was written down centuries later, from patchy records and family legend. Many dates are traditional, and the original shape of the office of consul is disputed. By tradition, the Roman Republic starts in 509 BC. Rome had been ruled by kings for 2.5 centuries. The last of them, Tarquin the Proud, judged without advisors and killed men who crossed him. Rome drove him out and swore off kings. But somebody still had to lead the army, and Rome was at war most years. Somebody had to judge disputes between citizens because there were no professional judges. Somebody had to summon the Senate and perform the rites Romans believed kept the gods on their side. Rome needed a man who could do a king's job without being one. The answer was blunt yet clever. Keep the power but split the office and limit how long it is held. Two men, elected by the people, holding the same office at the same time for 1 year. Nearly everything a king had done, both of them would do, neither alone and neither for long. These men were eventually called consuls. But why two? Because 2 is the smallest number that can check itself. One man cannot be stopped. So Rome gave each of the 2 the power to block the other, and 2 is the fewest that arrangement needs. With 2, there is no majority to hide behind. There is agreement, or a stop. And neither got half the job. Each held the whole authority the king had held, which Romans called imperium, the right to command an army and compel obedience from citizens. Which leaves the obvious question. If each consul held the king's whole authority, how was this much better than having one king? What stopped one of them, or both, from ruling in their own right? The first break is the other consul. Since both held the whole power, each could turn it against the other. When one gives an order, his colleague can step in and block it. The Romans called this intercessio, stepping in between. Our own word for it, veto, is Latin for I forbid, though whether a consul ever said it out loud, we do not know. The default setting of the office was not action, it was stalemate, and Rome preferred stalemate to a man who could not be stopped. Splitting one power between 2 men needed rules, and Rome's were theatrical. A consul walked the city with attendants called lictors, each carrying a fasces, a bundle of wooden rods. An axe was bound in among them once he left the city, rods to have a citizen beaten, an axe to kill him. In the city, the lictors switched consul every month. In the field, by tradition, the 2 commanded separate armies or took command on alternate days. The second break is time. A consul served for 12 months, then he was done, and the next pair was elected by the people. Men were sometimes elected again in the early centuries, and later rules demanded 10-year gaps between consulships, but nobody stayed in the chair. A king has time. Time is what lets a ruler elevate his friends and make himself hard to remove. Rome refused to hand anyone time. The third break waited at the exit. The day his year ended, a consul was a private citizen again, with no office and no protection, and a citizen he had wronged could take him to court for it. In office he was close to untouchable. Out of office he was not, and he could do nothing to stay in. Power for a year, answerable for it for life. The fourth break was extracted by the common people. Roman citizens were divided into 2 social orders, a small circle of old families called patricians, who held the offices and priesthoods, and everyone else, the plebs, who worked the land, paid the taxes, and filled the army. By tradition, in 494 BC, the plebs walked out of the city and refused to serve until they got protection from magistrates who could seize and flog them. They won themselves so-called tribunes of the plebs, who could block a consul's order while holding no consulship and commanding no soldiers. Those breaks answer the fear of too much power in one pair of hands. The second problem was plainer. The job was simply too big for one man. The consuls had to command the armies, hear the lawsuits, run the elections, handle the money, count the citizens, and perform the rites for a state that would not stop growing. At some point, it became too big for even two men, so Rome began cutting pieces off the office. From 443 BC, by tradition, an early piece went to two officials called censors. Their work was the census, the count of citizens, and the lists it produced. Those lists decided who counted as a citizen at all, what property a man was recorded as holding, and from that his tax, his voting group, and what kind of soldier he had to be. Whoever kept them could raise or sink a man's standing. The second large piece was the courts. From 367 BC, an official called the praetor took over everyday justice inside the city. That work never stopped, which is why it was in the way. A consul, commanding an army 200 miles off, cannot settle an argument about the boundary between two plots of land. More praetors came as territory grew, and the consulship narrowed toward command and presiding. There is a general point here, and the Romans reached it by doing rather than theorizing. Splitting a job is also a way of limiting it. Every power that moved away from the consulship was a power a consul no longer had. Rome never wrote a constitution. It accumulated one office by office. By the Roman tradition, for the first century and a half, both consulships went to patricians. The plebs fought the wars and paid for them, but were shut out of the office that directed them. A plebeian could be rich, could lead men in the field, and still could not stand for the consulship because of his ancestors. The consulship was one issue in a larger divide, known as the conflict of the orders, where the plebeians sought political equality with the patricians, who, in turn, sought to retain their ancestral rights. Beginning in 444 BC, some years had no consuls at all. Instead, Rome elected a board, military tribunes with consular power, 3 or more men holding a consul's authority between them. That board was not closed to plebeians, though patricians took most of the places. It was used on and off, irregularly, for the better part of 80 years. Some years had 2 consuls, some years the military committee. The deadlock broke in 367 BC. After years of pressure, including a 5-year blockade of public business that Livy credits to 2 tribunes named Licinius and Sextius, Rome passed the laws that carry their names. The board was dropped, the consulship returned for good, and it was opened to plebeians. Opened, not guaranteed. It was decades before one plebeian consul a year became normal. The office settled as the top rung of a ladder of offices, and ex-consuls became the Senate's senior voices. By sharing the highest office, Rome successfully kept a single person from consolidating power for more than 400 years. When the 2 consuls agreed, Rome had a fast, strong executive. When they disagreed, however, Rome had 2 commanders who could not overrule each other and would not obey each other. In the city, that meant nothing got done. In front of an enemy army, it meant disaster. In 218 BC, Hannibal invaded Italy with an army. The Carthaginian general had beaten the Romans 3 times in 2 years, while Rome assembled the largest army it had ever fielded, around 80,000 men. The consuls leading that army in 216 BC were Gaius Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus. Polybius says they took the command on alternate days, as tradition prescribed. Varro wanted to force a battle, Paulus wanted to play it safe and wear Hannibal down instead. Neither could overrule the other, and they kept squabbling. On Varro's day, near a village called Cannae in southern Italy, the Roman army formed up on open ground to offer battle. Hannibal accepted. During the battle, Hannibal let his center fall back, drew the Roman mass into the hollow, then closed around them from both flanks and from behind. An army packed too tight to turn was killed where it stood. Paulus died on the field with dozens of senators and tens of thousands of soldiers. Livy counts about 48,000 dead, Polybius nearer 70,000. Later historians lay the blame at Varro's feet. By alternating the command every day, the Romans followed an incoherent strategy while guaranteeing that the bolder man would get his way eventually. A battle offered cannot be taken back. Rome knew the office could jam, and had built an answer long before Cannae. In a crisis, the Senate could direct a consul to name a single person as dictator. A dictator held authority no colleague could block, for 6 months at most. When he laid it down, the two consuls resumed full authority. That is the trade Rome accepted. Two men with equal power meant nobody could act alone, and when they disagreed, nobody could act at all. The system wasn't perfect, but it worked for the better part of 500 years. Rome had once been ruled by a king who held all the power of the state, and it had expelled him for good.